My name is Elias Montano. I've always known my grandfather worked for the Vatican, but I thought he was just a librarian. Dusty books, Latin manuscripts, nothing extraordinary. At least, that's what he let everyone believe. When he passed away last month, he left behind very little. No money. No estate. Just a wooden box with a wax seal I couldn't identify and a handwritten note taped to the top. Do not open this box unless you are absolutely certain you're alone. And if you do, burn what's inside after reading it. They're watching. That alone should have been enough for me to walk away. But I didn't. I couldn't. I sat on the edge of my bed for nearly 10 minutes staring at the box. It wasn't locked, but something about it felt heavy. Not physically. Something else. Like the weight of a decision pressing down on my chest. The seal bore a three-eyed serpent, coiled around a cross. It wasn't any Vatican emblem I recognized, and I went to 12 years of Catholic school. I peeled it off carefully and lifted the lid. Inside, there was a bundle of old documents, tied together with black twine. A smaller envelope labeled Montano Protocol, Initiation, and a leather-bound journal with my grandfather's initials, M.A.M. The documents were parchment, worn and yellowed, and filled with symbols, notations, diagrams, and annotations in 3 different languages: Latin, Aramaic, and something I didn't recognize at all. There were hand-sketched illustrations of an enormous underground chamber, flanked by statues and lit by candlelight. One page was labeled Archivum Obscurum, the Forbidden Archive. I flipped to the journal. The first page read, "If you found this, Elias, then it means I failed to stop what's coming. The Vatican will tell you I died of natural causes. That's a lie. I'm so sorry to put this on you, but I had no choice. You have to finish what I started. And whatever you do, don't trust Father Benedetti." My hands were trembling. My grandfather was always the rational one. Grounded. Strict. Never once did he hint at anything supernatural. But now, he was talking about conspiracies, forbidden archives, people I shouldn't trust, and something coming. I opened the envelope marked Montano Protocol, Initiation. Inside was a Vatican ID badge, outdated by at least 30 years, bearing my grandfather's photo and the title Archivum Custodes, custodian of the archive. There was also a folded slip of paper with a single word written in blood-red ink. Demiurge. I had never seen that word before. But when I said it out loud, the lights in my apartment flickered. Just for a moment. Long enough to be noticed. Long enough to feel wrong. The journal entries grew darker the deeper I read. He talked about books that could change memory, rooms that restructured themselves, and an inner vault inside the forbidden archive that had no door, only a keyhole with no key. He said he buried something inside that vault. Something the Order wasn't supposed to find. I had no idea what the Order was. Then, near the end of the journal, I found a photo. Old, black and white. My grandfather standing beside 3 other men in clerical robes in front of a massive stone door. The inscription above the door read, "Nolite int rare nisi vocati estis." Do not enter unless summoned. That night, I dreamed of the door. It stood before me in a corridor that stretched far beneath the earth, lit only by torchlight. I heard whispers. Not around me, inside me. Speaking in a voice that was both male and female, both ancient and unborn. When I woke up, my mouth tasted like ash. I rushed to the Vatican archives online. Nothing came up for Archivum Obscurum. No public record. No mention of a custodian role. I called my uncle, who also worked in Rome for the church. He told me I must be mistaken. There was no record of my grandfather working in any capacity beyond document logistics. But when I mentioned Father Benedetti, his tone changed. "Elias," he said slowly, "how do you know that name?" I explained it was in my grandfather's journal. Silence. Then he whispered something that sent chills through me. "Do not speak to anyone about him. Ever. I'll call you back." He never did. That was 3 days ago. Since then, someone has tried to break into my apartment. Twice. My mail is opened. My laptop has started logging into Vatican servers I never accessed. And earlier today, I found a photo of myself slipped under my door, taken from inside my apartment. There was no note. Just that same symbol burned into the corner, the three-eyed serpent. I don't know who I can trust. I don't even know if I should keep going. But if my grandfather was telling the truth, then something buried inside the forbidden archive has started to wake up. And someone, somewhere, wants it back. I flew to Rome the next morning on a red-eye flight using the last of my savings. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my mother, not even the office where I worked part-time at a publishing house. I left my phone at home and bought a burner at the airport. Paranoia had sunk its claws into me, but it didn't feel unjustified. My grandfather's journal included coordinates written in pencil in the margins of one page. I plugged them into a digital map, beneath the Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana, the official Vatican library. But the coordinates pointed to a section with no public access. No blueprints. Just a blank space carved beneath the earth like a cavity hidden in the bone. The night I arrived, I stayed at a small hostel run by a widow who spoke broken English and burned incense every hour on the hour. I didn't sleep. Instead, I read the final pages of my grandfather's journal again. One line stood out, etched in shaky handwriting. There are books in the forbidden archive that were never written by man. The Church claims to contain them, but it does not control them. The next morning, I walked the cobbled path to the Vatican's eastern wing where the public library tour begins. I didn't join the line. Instead, I slipped into the side courtyard near the southern wall, flashing the old Vatican ID badge from the box. It was a gamble. I half expected to be arrested. Instead, the guard looked at the ID, then at me, and waved me through with a slight nod. Inside, the air was different, older, heavier. I passed through marble halls and winding corridors until I reached the Librarium Subterranea, the underground stacks. Signs were in Latin only. The walls were lined with grim-faced portraits of scholars, many of whom had no names, only dates and seals. A robed attendant emerged from a side room. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but he seemed to see me clearly. He spoke quietly. "You are not supposed to be here," he said. "I'm following my grandfather's path," I answered, almost reflexively. Matteo Augustine Montano. That name changed something. He blinked, slow, deliberate, and then turned away, motioning for me to follow. We passed through a hallway sealed with iron gates. Beyond it, the light dimmed until only the flicker of old sconces guided our steps. The attendant stopped at a massive wooden door inlaid with a red wax seal, unbroken. He whispered a word I didn't recognize, and the wax sizzled and vanished. The door creaked open. I had found the forbidden archive. The room beyond defied logic. It was circular, with tiers of shelves rising into darkness. There were no visible ladders, only floating platforms that drifted gently between levels. Some books pulsed faintly like they were breathing. Others were chained to the shelves with rosary beads and salt rings. A cold wind moved through the space, yet there were no vents. Etched into the floor was the three-eyed serpent. Its eyes glowed faintly red as I stepped inside. "This is where your grandfather worked," the attendant said behind me, "and where he died, though no one witnessed it." "He was murdered," I said, my voice hollow. "Perhaps," he replied. "Or perhaps he read something he shouldn't have." He handed me a black envelope. No seal. No writing. "He told me to give you this if you ever came here." That was 21 years ago. I opened the envelope and found a photograph. A still image of my grandfather standing at a lectern deep within the archive, holding an open book. The photo had no edges, no framing, just the image printed on unnaturally smooth paper. There were symbols around the margins, ones I'd seen in the sketches from the wooden box. Beneath it, in familiar handwriting. I couldn't burn it. I couldn't even close it. "If you're seeing this, then I failed. You must do what I couldn't." The attendant nodded once more and vanished into the corridor, sealing the iron gate behind him. I was alone. The first few shelves were filled with titles I couldn't read, books bound in skin-like material, scrolls sealed with gold, tiny booklets that buzzed slightly when I passed them. But then I found it, the aisle numbered M27. My grandfather's journal mentioned it as the Vault of Prohibited Narratives. At the end of the aisle was a pulpit, and on it, a book sat open, exactly like the photo. I approached it slowly. There was a faint hum in the air, like static on an old television. The pages turned themselves, slowly, as though inhaling knowledge. And there, etched in black ink, was the word again. Demiurge. Suddenly, the lights dimmed further. Something moved behind me. I turned, no one. But when I looked back at the book, the ink had changed. A new line appeared beneath the word, written in real time, the ink forming on the parchment as I stared. You were not summoned, Eyeless Montano. Leave now or finish the work he abandoned. My heart slammed in my chest. I stumbled backward. My phone buzzed, even though there was no signal. A new message appeared, with no number attached. He opened the door. You must close it. Then the screen went black. I backed out of the aisle, heart pounding, breath ragged. The serpent symbol on the floor now pulsed with dim, crimson light. Something had awakened the moment I saw that word again. Demiurge. Something watching. Something waiting. I left the forbidden archive that day shaken to my core. Every step I took back through the Vatican's corridors felt heavier, like the archive had marked me somehow. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't speak. I just walked. The robed attendant was gone when I passed the last iron gate. The candlelight behind me flickered unnaturally, as if reacting to my presence. I didn't stop to see what would happen next. Back at the hostel, the woman at the desk avoided my eyes. There was a note on my pillow. No name. Just 5 words. You are not the first. That night, I dreamt of a mirror, tall, arched, framed in bronze. A serpent slithered across its surface, leaving trails of fire behind. The mirror cracked down the middle, and from the fracture stepped a shadow wearing my grandfather's face. But his eyes were gone, just twin voids filled with a faint red glow. When I woke up, there was a mirror leaning against the wall beside my bed. I hadn't brought it. The hostel owner swore she didn't either. And in the reflection, I wasn't alone. A figure stood just behind my right shoulder, dressed in a priest's cassock. Phil. Watching. When I turned, no one was there. But when I looked back into the mirror, his reflection remained. I threw a blanket over it and left. I needed answers, and there was only one person I could think of, the one name my grandfather told me not to trust, Father Benedetti. He was listed as deceased in the Vatican's public registry, died in 1989, buried in the priest section of Campo Verano Cemetery. But my uncle had reacted too strongly. That kind of fear doesn't come from old ghosts. So I went to the cemetery. There was a grave, yes. Weathered. Untended. But it was marked only Benedictus. Archivum. No dates. No birth. No death. Just the title. I stood there for nearly 15 minutes before I noticed it. A white flower, fresh, lay at the base. No one else had been there today. I was certain. Then I heard a voice behind me. You've seen it, haven't you? I turned. A man, maybe late 50s, in a black wool coat and gloves, stood a few feet back. He wore glasses and held a cane, though he didn't seem to need it. Who are you? I asked, instinctively stepping back. I'm someone who used to guard the things that should never be read. And you are Eyeless. I've been waiting for you. Are you Benedetti? No. But I served under him. My name is Lucian. And if you've read the book, then we don't have much time. He told me to follow him to a cafe near the basilica. We sat in a booth near the back, far from windows. He kept his hands folded, his eyes darting to every person who entered. Paranoia was stitched into his movements. What do you know about the Demiurge? I asked. Lucian flinched. That word is older than language, he said softly. Older than scripture. Older than the church. But it's in the Vatican archive. No. That's the lie. It's under the archive. It's what the forbidden archive was built to contain, not to house knowledge, but to keep certain knowledge from escaping. And someone let it out. I showed him the photo of my grandfather at the lectern. Lucian stared at it like he was seeing a ghost. I was there that night, he said. He said he found something in the vault of prohibited narratives. A name. A phrase. He thought he could resist it. But he couldn't, I whispered. No one does, Lucian replied. Once you see it, once you speak it, you begin to change. It gets inside you. Not like a demon. It doesn't possess. It rewrites. What do you mean? He hesitated, then leaned closer. The demiurge isn't a being. It's a construct. A parasite built from divine language. Not demonic. Not angelic. Something else. It was buried centuries ago during the Council of Enoch, before the Church even existed in its modern form. Your grandfather wasn't the first to find it, but he was the first to record its pattern. I pulled out the parchment I'd found in the wooden box, the one with the symbol burned into the margins. Lucian froze. That's one of them, he said, voice trembling. One of the 8 seals. The pattern fragments. If all of them are spoken aloud, if they're read in the right sequence, the containment breaks. How many are left? 2. My blood ran cold. So what happens if it's released? He looked me in the eyes. Then everything changes. The barrier between perception and reality collapses. You stop seeing the world as it is, and begin seeing it as it truly is. Most people go mad within hours. Some simply vanish. I thought of the mirror, of the reflection that wasn't mine. What do? I asked. Lucian reached into his coat and pulled out a slip of paper. A name and address in northern Italy. There's one person left who knows how to reseal the pattern. A former cartographer of the archive. Her name is Sophia Bellantine. Find her. She lives off-grid. No phones. No internet. You'll need to bring her something. Something from your grandfather. She won't speak to anyone else. Then he paused. And Eyeless. Don't trust mirrors. Not anymore. That's how it watches. He stood and left without another word. Back at my room, the blanket had fallen from the mirror. But this time, my reflection was smiling. And I wasn't. It took me nearly 2 days to reach the northern region of Valle d'Aosta, an isolated alpine stretch nestled between Italy and the Swiss border. Snow blanketed the roads in heavy silence, and my rented car struggled with the incline. Lucian's note had no coordinates, only a name, Sophia Bellantine, and the name of a monastery long abandoned by the Church, Santuario di Vescovo Senzacci, the sanctuary of the Eyeless bishop. The place didn't show up on GPS. No online records. But when I asked locals about it, they grew quiet or changed the subject. One old man at a fuel station simply muttered, "It's not there anymore," before walking away. But it was there. Hidden behind a wall of frost-bitten pines, half swallowed by the mountain itself, the sanctuary loomed like a shadow from another century. Romanesque arches, black stone, and the remnants of a bell tower twisted by time. Etched above the entrance was an inscription in ancient Latin. Que videre omnia, videre nihil. He who sees all, sees nothing. I stepped inside with my breath held. The air smelled of burnt myrrh and something older, ozone and dust soaked in memory. A narrow hall led to a chapel, long stripped of pews. In their place were shelves filled with hand-drawn maps, many unrolled, stretching across the floor, ceiling, even pinned to old confession booths. The maps were like none I'd ever seen. Not topographic. Not political. They mapped experiences. Patterns of thought. Theological topographies of the human soul. Entire diagrams built around a person's birth date, dreams, fears. Some were marked with black candles. Others were circled in red ink with a recurring Latin phrase. Linea veritatis incarnati. Lines of incarnated truth. And then I saw her. She stood in the apse, feeding a fire beneath a copper basin. Mid-40s, hair like braided ink, and a stare that didn't blink long enough to be natural. She didn't look up as I approached. "You're too late," she said. I hesitated. "You don't know why I'm here." She looked at me then. And I swear, for a moment, her pupils rotated like a compass needle locking into direction. "I know who you are, Eyeless Montano. Matteo's grandson. You carry the fourth seal, whether you understand it or not." I showed her the parchment. The one with the symbol. She didn't touch it. Just nodded. "You shouldn't have brought that here." She gestured to a desk beneath a stained glass window that no longer caught light. I laid the parchment down, and for the first time, she moved with urgency, placing salt, metal tongs, and a mirror shard around it. Then she drew a circle of red ash. "What is this place?" I asked, eyes scanning the impossible maps again. "It's not a monastery," she said. "Not anymore. It hasn't been since the Vatican lost control of the Forbidden Archive in 1964. It's a cartographic sanctuary now. A haven for those who map what should not be mapped. We trace the fracture lines in reality caused by divine concepts." "You mean like the demiurge?" She nodded grimly. "The demiurge is not a god. Not even a fallen one. It is a narrative corruption, an intelligence born from misinterpretation. A fracture in theological truth. Your grandfather accidentally documented part of its name in full syntax. That's what woke it. Now it's trying to complete itself." My voice caught in my throat. Complete itself, how? By inserting itself into more minds. One mind at a time. The archive doesn't just house texts, Eyeless. It reads you back. Suddenly the maps fluttered. A tremor ran through the walls. A gust of wind blew through the sealed windows and extinguished every candle in the sanctuary, except one. The one beside the parchment. Sophia turned to me, alarmed. "You've already seen too much. That's why it's following you. But there's a way to delay it." "Delay? You can't stop it. But you can interrupt the narrative before it roots. It's not about destroying it. It's about discontinuing the story it's writing inside your life." She reached beneath a floorboard and removed a velvet pouch. From it, she unwrapped what looked like a monastic tuning fork, ancient and rusted but covered in etched symbols. She struck it against the stone wall, and the frequency made my teeth ache. She handed it to me. "This disrupts semiotic intrusion. It won't last forever, but it'll give you time to finish what your grandfather started." "And what exactly is that?" "To return the fourth seal," she said, pointing to the parchment, "to the inner vault beneath the archive. The one with no door. The seal was never supposed to leave. When Matteo extracted it, he breached the seventh boundary." "You're talking about dimensions?" I asked. "No. Narratives. Concepts that should remain unread." She gave me one last item, a photograph. It showed my grandfather again. But this time, he was kneeling in front of a mirror, the same one I had seen in my dreams. Reflected behind him was a doorway, but only in the mirror. Carved above it were 3 words. "Via Nostra Veritas." "Our truth becomes the way," she translated. "That's the only path left to return what he took." I packed the fork and parchment carefully. But before I left, Sophia gripped my wrist. "You need to know something, Eyeless." "What?" "The fifth seal has already been read. By someone in the Vatican. There's a rogue priest working under a false name, Father Emeritus Albanus. He believes releasing the demiurge will restore something ancient. Something divine. He's going to try to open the vault. And if he does, then the archive won't contain ideas anymore. It will become one." I drove away from the sanctuary with my heart in my throat. Snow began to fall heavier. The trees lining the highway seemed to bend toward the road like they were listening. My rearview mirror showed nothing but blackness. No reflection. And when I looked again, the mirror was gone. I returned to the Vatican at nightfall. The guard at the southern gate didn't even look up when I flashed the ID again. Maybe he wasn't really seeing me. Maybe something else was. The moment I stepped through the archway, I felt it, a pressure, like walking into a place where the air remembered things. Horrible things. I wasn't going back to the main archive. I was going deeper. Sophia's map had shown me the path to the inner vault, the one with no door, no records, no floor plans. She called it La Cava Inconclusa, the unfinished hollow. According to her, the room didn't exist in the traditional sense. It manifested only when all 4 seals were present near the original containment site. And now, I had one of them. The elevator to the librarium subterranea creaked downward in slow silence. When I stepped out, the lights above flickered, then stabilized. The serpent symbol on the floor was dimly lit, but it didn't glow like last time. It throbbed. My heart beat in time with it. I walked toward aisle M27, the book still on the pulpit. Only now, it was closed. The cover bore a symbol I hadn't seen before, a spiral folding in on itself, fractal and infinite. At its center was a black dot. An absence. The moment I stepped near it, the spiral began to move, turning as though pulled by an unseen hand. Then came a voice, deep, resonant, ancient. Not spoken aloud. Inside me. You have what was taken. You know not the cost of returning it. You know not the cost of keeping it. I reached into my satchel and pulled out the parchment. The 4th seal. It pulsed faintly now, glowing in rhythm with the spiral. Behind me, footsteps. I turned. A man stood there in priest's robes, face half-shrouded, eyes bright with something unnatural. He held a book in one hand, bound in bone and fastened shut with 3 iron clasps. I recognized him from an old Vatican ID photograph Sophia had shown me, Father Emeritus Albanus. I was hoping you would bring it, he said, voice calm. You've carried it farther than your grandfather could. What do you want with it? I asked. To finish the pattern. To return the world to its original narrative. Before man added his confusion. Before the demiurge was bound. You're not freeing a god, I said. You're giving life to a lie. He smiled faintly. Every religion is a story. This one just happens to be true enough. He raised the bone-bound book and began to chant, words that didn't sound like Latin or Hebrew or Greek. They sounded older. Incorrect, like something spoken by a mouth not meant to speak. The archive began to shake. Books unchained themselves. Pages flew like birds released from cages. The pulpit cracked. The serpent symbol on the floor turned red-hot. I screamed, pulled the tuning fork from my bag, and struck it against the stone. Boom. The frequency shook the walls. Albanus stumbled backward, covering his ears. The seal in my hand ignited, fireless but bright. The spiral on the book stopped turning. Then, a door appeared. Just beyond the pulpit. A shimmering archway formed in the air, its edges alive with static. Carved above it were the 3 words from the mirror photo. Via Nostra Veritas. This was the inner vault. Or perhaps the concept of one. I ran toward it, every cell in my body telling me not to. Behind me, Albanus screamed, not in rage, but in terror. His voice warped, cracked, no longer human. I looked back once, and his face was melting. Not with fire. With text. His skin became scripture, and the scripture began to unwrite itself. I crossed the threshold. Inside the vault, there was no light. No floor. No ceiling. Only books, miles of them, suspended in air. Each one floating, closed, unreadable. Some bore Vatican sigils. Others, ancient runes. One had a cover made of glass, inside which I saw my own reflection screaming silently. At the center hovered a black cube. The seal vibrated violently in my hand. It wanted to return. So I stepped forward and pressed the parchment against the surface of the cube. It sank into it, absorbed like water into a sponge. Then, stillness. The entire vault paused. I felt it then, a presence not malevolent, but not benign. A force that was watching me not as a man, but as a chapter in a book it had once written and forgotten. You have disrupted the ending. The page remains unwritten. Return to your world and forget. Or remain and remember everything. I said nothing. I just stepped backward. Out of the vault. The door closed behind me without sound. I awoke in a hospital in Rome. No burns. No wounds. Just exhaustion. The Vatican listed me as a tourist who collapsed near the Eastern Courtyard. No record of the forbidden archive. No mention of Albanus. Lucian disappeared. Sophia's sanctuary burned to the ground 2 nights later. And the mirror? It was waiting in my apartment when I returned home. Wrapped in newspaper. No sender. In the reflection, I still look like me. But when I blink, my reflection doesn't. Scroll epilogue. Sometimes I still dream of the vault. Of the books I didn't open. Of the stories I didn't finish. And sometimes I wonder, was I the reader? Or just the story being read?